Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. We're going to go ahead and get started. I am Andrew Coombs, those of you that don't know me, and I'm going to be your MC for this afternoon for the debate. The first person that I want to introduce, though, is Karina Bravo, and she is going to tell you about these wonderful competitors that we have here today.
Recognized Mensa member and social studies teacher here at Riverdale, Mrs. Lindahl. And sponsor of Riverdale Spanish Honor Society and Spanish teacher Senora Fuentes. For our seniors, we have future student body president and science club officer Tyler Redmond. And Spanish Club Officer Megan Taylor.
All right, thank you. I also want to introduce our judges. Here in the front row, we've got our 4 judges. First of all is Dr. Patrick White. He is a former teacher here at Riverdale, and he ran the student-teacher debate here for 7 years, and he wanted me to tell you that teachers have won 6 of those 7 years, and the students have won 1. So no pressure to like that here today. So Dr. Patrick White, please give him a round. Next in the center, we have 2 seasoned debaters from MTSU, Kat Brooks and Alex Fingerroot. Both are very good debaters themselves and have judged high school debates in the past, and so I want to welcome them, please. And finally, we have Dr. Patrick Ritchie. He's a professor at MTSU. He is the debate coach there at MTSU and director of forensics. So please give him a round of applause. And then with that, we'll go ahead and toss the coin. And the teachers are going to get to call heads or tails. Teachers will take the con, and the students will take the pro. And students, you will get to decide if you go first or last.
We choose to go last.
You go last. All right. So let's have one more round of applause, and we'll get started here.
Good afternoon. My partner and I are here today to reject the resolution which states that personal handguns ought to be banned. Banning firearms would not solve the problems that our nation faces. Changes should be made, but a total ban on handguns is not the answer. Our 4 points for this argument are as follows. 1, the banning of personal firearms violates a citizen's Second Amendment right. 2, a ban on handguns will not deter crime. 3, handguns themselves can deter crime. And 4, relatively few people are killed by guns in the U.S. Point 1 states that the banning of personal firearms violates the citizen's Second Amendment right. The Second Amendment states that a well-regulated militia, being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Banning personal handguns directly infringes on the right Americans have to bear arms. In addition to this, 2 Supreme Court cases, the District of Columbia et al. Versus Heller and McDonald versus the City of Chicago, have ruled that the Second Amendment is an individual right. Point 2 affirms that a ban on handguns will not deter crime. Banning guns will not stop criminals from retaining guns and using them to commit crimes. A ban would in turn unarm citizens, therefore stripping them of a way of defending themselves. Take the City of Chicago, for instance. The city has banned gun shops, shooting ranges, assault weapons, and high-capacity magazines, but in 2014, there were still 2,089 shooting victims, 390 of which were murders or homicides. Whether or not laws are in place, criminals will still carry out crimes. Another notable case is that of the United Kingdom. The possession of handguns is banned in the UK, but there are 2,034 violent crimes per 100,000 people in the UK. Compare that to the 466 violent crimes per 100,000 people in the US. Also, because kitchen knives have been used in as many as half of all stabbings in the UK, there's now a group of doctors working to ban kitchen knives. This point being that banning items will not help. Point 3 states that handguns themselves deter crime. Gun ownership has doubled in the 20th century while the murder rate has decreased. In addition to this, John R. Lott, Jr., the author of More Guns, Less Crime, Understanding Crime and Gun Control Laws, stated that states with the largest increases in gun ownership also have the largest drops in violent crimes. Point 4 states that relatively few Americans are killed by gun violence. According to the CDC, Americans are 21.5 times more likely to die of heart disease than to die from a firearm. In addition to this, drug overdose deaths have surpassed those caused by firearms. The CDC reported 46,471 Americans died of a drug overdose in 2013, while 33,636 died as a result of firearms. To close, we strongly oppose a ban on handguns in the United States because the banning of personal firearms violates a citizen's Second Amendment right. A ban on handguns will not deter crime. Handguns themselves can deter crime. And finally, relatively few people are killed by guns in the U.S. Thank you. Are the judges ready?
My partner and I come here today to make our case that the following resolution be passed. In the United States, private ownership of handguns ought to be banned. Let's begin by defining some terms. According to the Collins English Dictionary, private ownership is defined as the fact of being owned by a private individual or organization rather than by the state or the public body. Finally, we need to address what a ban on handguns would mean. A full ban, which we argue should be done, would include the halt of sales, manufacturing, and ownership of handguns by civilians in the United States. First, let's look at some economic data. According to an analysis published by the Pacific Institute of Research and Evaluation, the total estimated cost for gun violence is $229 billion a year. This takes into consideration the $8.6 billion in direct costs, such as funding prison sentences for convicted murderers, and the indirect costs, another $221 billion in areas such as medical costs and lost wages. The gun and ammo industry does bring in profit for the country, but its overall economic impact is only estimated at around $42.9 billion, reports the National Shooting Sports Foundation. This number is shockingly lower than the cost to taxpayers caused by guns. Additionally, handguns are frequently used as a tool of violence. Recently, the largest number of homicides has been invariably committed by handguns every year. According to the Federal Bureau of Investigation's homicide data from 2010 to 2014, handguns were used to kill 48.5% of the 62,061 total victims. According to the Harvard School of Public Health, suicides actually outnumber homicides 2-to-1. The Harvard professor of health policy, David Hemingway, states that handguns are used frequently in suicides because of their easy access and high lethality and the impulsive nature of almost 90% of suicide attempts. The study also found that in states with higher rates of gun ownership, suicide rates were also higher. Unintentional shootings are also a problem. From 2005 to 2010, almost 3,800 people died from gun accidents, according to the Centers for Disease Control. The report also showed that in many of these cases, children were the shooter or the victim, a result of improper gun storage. Now many may argue that the strict measures on gun ownership will have no effect on the overall deaths, nor will it halt crimes committed with handguns. But the data is clear. Gun control works in every case. The United Kingdom is a perfect example of this fact. In the UK, there is a strict and strenuous process to own firearms, causing there to be fewer gun owners and thus fewer guns to go around. In the United Kingdom, there are annually an estimated 15 to 38 people killed a year, according to the Sydney School of Public Health. Contrasting this, the United States has an average of over 10,000 homicides committed by firearms every year, a much bigger percentage than in the stricter UK. Another example of successful gun control is in Australia, where in 1996, after a mass shooting left 35 dead, politicians created and executed laws that would limit ownership of assault rifles, handguns, and many forms of ammunition. After 16 years of this, the Australian Bureau of Statistics found that the homicide rates with firearms. In the study also showed that homicide rates, firearms also showed a decrease. The data is clear. Handguns kill in numbers that belong on a war memorial, not on the national news. They have no morally justified purpose in the hands of civilians, and for that reason we negate the resolution, or we affirm the resolution.
We take 30 seconds of our time.
You mentioned that children oftentimes are the cause of many of these accidental gun shootings. Could you read that again? Could you read where you said that?
I said that from 2005 to 2010, almost 3,800 people died from gun accidents, and the report also showed that in many of these cases, children were the shooter and/or the victim.
Do you not agree that that would be the responsibility of the parent or the person in charge to keep their firearms?
I did say that it was a result of improper gun storage, which would be on the parents, but the parents are civilians of the United States.
While they're civilians of the United States, do you not agree that it would be important for us to focus on training these parents to safely store their guns instead of banning an entire nation of having firearms?
I would argue that safety programs are already in place and they are obviously not working. I have a question for you. You mentioned the Second Amendment and the two Supreme Court cases. Are you saying that just because the Supreme Court has ruled in something, it cannot be overruled by later Supreme Court cases?
No, I'm just stating that if you read the Second Amendment, which I can do again, you can see that the definition is that citizens have the individual right to bear arms. Right here it says, a well-regulated militia, being necessary for the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed.
Okay, would you not agree that amendments have been repealed in the past, such as the 18th Amendment, which instituted prohibition, which was later repealed by the 21st Amendment?
Okay. A question for you. I had a question about the money that you referred to, the 229 billion spent on gun violence. Could you be more specific and tell me how that was spent?
Yes, 8.6 billion was in direct costs directly related to court money, such as for prison sentences, and then the other 221 billion came from medical costs, wages that had to be spent for disabilities, the times that the injured could not work, funerals, things of that nature. I have a question. You said that heart disease kills more than the handguns. How is that relevant when heart disease is a natural cause where handguns are a tool that can be banned?
This comparison was used in order to let everyone know that how many deaths occur in a year and how there are more deaths every year. Let me go back through this history. They're 21.5 times more likely to die of heart disease than to die of fire.
If I'm rebutting. My colleague said it well. It states very well in black and white, the right of the people to keep. I believe the word keep is ownership. And I believe people is private. So therefore I'm talking about private ownership. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Until that amendment is written, shall not be infringed is shall not be infringed. Violence, you said 48.5%, at least 51.5% for other means of violence. I believe that's what you stated. I may be wrong on that. Accidental deaths. People die in showers. People die from chainsaws, cutting a tree down. They handle down the limb while they're cutting it. People die in cars. People die from drug overdose. People die. Accidents happen. They're called accidents. Suicide rate. I hate suicide. I mean, I've been affected by it. I know it. And a gun is a tool. A gun is a device. It's like a hammer, a nice pick, a chainsaw, aforementioned. And I'm sorry that people commit suicide. I wish they wouldn't. I wish they'd talk to me first. If you want to ban this, how do you enforce it? How are you gonna? Where's the last gun gonna come from? Guns are out there. There's a lot of guns on the streets. I heard nothing in your plan of taking the guns away, removing the guns, where to put the guns. How do you gonna? Where's going to be the implementation if you pass this? Finally, it's been decided. A young man wanted a gun. He lived in Washington, D.C. He was a safety officer. He lived in D.C., a federal institution called Washington, D.C., federal property. Second Amendment applied to federal government. It's called the Bill of Rights. And he sued and won. And then a young man in Chicago, maybe no man, I don't know his age, wanted to have a gun. His name was McDonald. He sued. It wasn't federal property, it's private property, Chicago, Illinois. They're using the 14th Amendment. They incorporated the Second Amendment and said it applies to Chicago as well. So therefore, the Supreme Court has ruled that anyone in the United States, per the Second Amendment, has a right to have a gun. And until someone gives me a better plan of how to better way to get rid of those guns and enforce those laws, I want to make sure that people have the right to protect themselves by having a gun if they choose to have one. Thank you very much.
Handguns were created for a violent purpose. Their only use is taking lives or threatening to take lives. The resolution states that they ought to be banned. Immoral things have no place in a culture that is trying to be more moral. Jonathan Hitt, a social psychologist at New York University, reported that at the time of the country's founding, there existed an honor culture. This means a culture where violent challenges were the result of conflict. A perfect example would be the classic duel. Men were expected to defend their own and others' honor by rising to the challenge, even if death was the consequence. In that context, an amendment that protected the right to bear arms made sense. It was a cultural norm to protect yourself. However, this culture has since been overruled by a dignity culture. A dignity culture assumes that individuals have enough moral security to not personally defend themselves. Such a culture rises above the old duel culture and rises above petty violence. Handguns are irrelevant in America's current culture and ought to be rendered a thing of the past. On the Constitution, just because the Supreme Court has recently ruled that handgun ownership is constitutional does not mean that this was the right decision, nor does it mean that the court does not have the power to change these decisions. Looking at past cases, such as Plessy v. Ferguson, in which the court ruled that segregation in public facilities was okay and perfectly constitutional, we can see that the court has clearly made incorrect judgments at a moral capacity. And if we look more recently, we can see that the court does its best to fix these past errors. Such an example would be the famous case of Brown v. the Board of Education, which ruled segregation in schools to be unconstitutional. Future court cases have the potential to rule handguns to be banned. When they brought up the cause of death, the pro team argued that there are causes of death that claim more lives than handguns. So looking at the handgun deaths is irrelevant. This is a faulty argument, because just because more people die from these things does not mean that these handgun deaths are not an issue. Drugs and heart issues do kill, but so do guns. We use medicine to prevent heart attacks. We use rehab and treatments to prevent drug overdose. So why would we not treat this handgun violence like we treat other epidemics? This is a major killer, and to stop it, we have to stop it at the source with a ban on handguns. When they brought up about how we would implement this and how we would carry it out, we are not asked how this should be implemented. We are simply arguing that, that these are lethal and that they should be banned. We are not to explain the methodology in which that will occur. These weapons are lethal, they kill in mass numbers, and they should not be allowed to be in the hands of public, untrained citizens. Thank you very much.
I don't believe anywhere in the Second Amendment I read the word trained, educated, informed. Thank you very much.
Do you have a question in that statement?
Oh, question. Yes, absolutely. Where in the Second Amendment was the word trained, informed, educated?
At the very time that this occurred, there were many people who were enlisted to defend the country as part of a militia. We currently do not have any sort of draft system. We do not have a system in which people will be taken up to bear arms to defend their country at any sort of moment's notice, just to be formed as a militia at all times. So we believe that the benefits of not allowing these untrained people greatly outweigh any sort of consequences of not having these weapons in these untrained hands.
A man much wiser than me once said, and I quote, "The tree of liberty must be refreshed from time to time with the blood of patriots and tyrants." I submit to you the reason this Constitution this was written was to protect us from us, to protect Americans from America, to protect patriots from tyrants. We didn't want to be under another tyrant. Therefore, that's why this was written.
Would you mind me asking who gave that quote?
A young man by the name of Thomas Jefferson.
You know, I think everyone in the audience would agree that Thomas Jefferson is a very intellectual man, and I think that we all hold him to a very high standard. And in that, he mentioned that there needed to be the blood of patriots and tyrants. But you know what blood he didn't mention? He didn't mention the blood of the thousands of people who are killed by the misuse of these handguns. He didn't mention the blood of the children that find these weapons and think it's a toy. The children that pointed at their friends laughing and then pull the trigger and their friend is dying. Thomas Jefferson did not consider that blood when he made that statement. And I believe that if he did consider that blood, he might have chose his words a little bit different.
He also may consider the older lady who sits at home while her son is at work, who has the ability to defend herself from a home invasion. He also may be thinking about the person who, leaving work one night, sees 4 or 5 young men trotting to his car and understands that that person is kind of outnumbered, maybe in danger, but because that person has a tool known as a gun, he has the ability to defend himself.
To summarize what has been said throughout this speech, my partner and I are here to reject the resolution. We reject that firearms be banned. We believe that the banning of personal firearms violates a citizen's Second Amendment right. A ban on handguns will not deter crime, and handguns themselves can deter crime. Relatively few people are killed in the U.S. compared to other statistics that are out there, compared to other diseases, compared to other things. We need to be focusing not on whether or not we have, not on banning guns, but on educating citizens on how to properly store and use their guns. This would change all of what they just mentioned. They mentioned how accidental deaths are caused by firearms. Well, let's educate people. Let's have people learn how to store their guns, learn how to teach children or teach their children how to use guns, teach them the proper use, and educate their children not to think that guns are toys, but to know the proper use that they can be used in self-defense. I want to reiterate that gun ownership has doubled in the 20th century while murder rates have decreased. Having a gun arms someone and allows them to be able to defend themselves. My last statement is going to be to again mention those Supreme Court cases, the District of Columbia et al. Versus Heller and McDonald versus the case of Chicago, in which the Supreme Court told us that yes, the Second Amendment is about an individual's right to be able to bear arms. And that is the final statement I would like to say for our case.
And the judges are. The resolution states that private ownership of handguns in the United States ought to be banned. We strongly support this resolution because handguns are intended for an amoral purpose, and handguns are costing unspeakable totals in capital, human and otherwise. Handguns are an instrument of death, and this death is shockingly apparent. Thousands of Americans die each and every year from handgun violence, and even more are injured, devastating thousands of American families and costing this country billions. Compared to 22 other developed countries, the United States gun-related murder rate is 25 times higher, and the gun-related suicide rate is 8 times higher, the American Journal of Medicine reports. So we see that these kinds of numbers obviously shouldn't be existing in a modern, developed society. When this country was founded, the sociological culture was of a completely different form. We no longer live in an honor culture where we are expected to defend our personages no matter what the cost. It's time that we embrace the dignity culture that has emerged, one where we put our defense in the hands of our defense forces, not ourselves. The only people with access to handguns should be those trained and certified to ensure civilian protection. Clearly, letting Americans own their own handguns only provides ample opportunity for violent criminals to perform quick and lethal actions. We see that banning guns in other countries has greatly reduced the number of gun deaths, so it is undeniable that a ban would be effective. It is time to get rid of this unnecessary and immoral weapons placed in the hands of citizens. It is simply not worth the lives lost, so please vote pro.
We will be taking 1 minute.
start with the quote. This quote comes from the man whose wife is a mess. It says, if you outlaw guns, only outlaws will have guns. So how do you answer that? We will disarm the people who are able to do good with their guns, and the people who are going to commit crimes will still have guns, and they will be able to commit those crimes. And how do you respond to that?
We have evidence from the United Kingdom in which they banned the private ownership of weapons there, and they saw a decrease in gun homicides from numbers in the thousands to only 15 to 38 per year. That is an extreme decline, and we believe it justifies the banning of these handguns.
We have a question about one of your sources. You mentioned in your first speech about Dr. John Watt, who said that he made a point about preventing gun violence. Are you aware that John Watt is a current columnist at Fox News, and his work has been the source of the subject of many cases regarding credibility, and he used to work for several universities, but since has not worked. So would you consider this source credible?
You're questioning, correct me if I'm wrong, you're correcting John R. Lott, the author of More Guns, Less Crime, Understanding Crime and Gun Control Laws?
Yes, we are.
Okay, well, his statement, I'll read again, states that we have the largest increases in gun ownership, also have the largest drops in violent crimes. So if we look at cases, if we really understand this quote, we'll see that just like not only him, but other sources have said, gun ownership has doubled in the 20th century while the murder rates have decreased because these people are armed, they're able to defend themselves.
But that doesn't answer our question about his credibility. It was shown by a review board, an academic board, that the evidence and research done is not credible, the research that he has done.
No one writes anything without bias. You have to be motivated to write it. She's quoting a source. She found the source. The man wrote a book. She quoted the book.
But this board found that his research was not credible, that he had incorrect data in his research. That is not bias, that is falsification.
Well, I wouldn't attack the source unless I knew who's called credible as well. A lot of people can call anyone credible or incredible.
It was the Court of Appeals.
Okay, I have lived in Europe for 3 years. I lived in Europe for 3 years. The Netherlands, to be exact. By the way, 45.7% of people in Switzerland own a handgun. But there's 24 homicides in Switzerland in 2010, and only 253 gun suicides. But yet, almost half of people in Switzerland own a gun. It's not the gun that's the problem. The gun is not an amoral device. A gun's a moral device. A gun was made to protect you, to keep you from getting shot. The reason a soldier has a gun, I know I was in the Army, is to make sure no one can shoot me. A gun is not amoral. A gun is moral. It's to keep you from dying. It wasn't invented to kill. It was invented to keep from getting killed. Thank you very much.
Handguns are the concealed killer. The con team has not only not justified the blood spilled by those weapons that can simply be prevented by a single law, but they have also been forced into arguments lacking proper evidence and relying in many cases on a single quotation taken out of context. The Supreme Court has changed their mind in the past on segregation, and they can surely change their minds again to prevent the thousands of American deaths and save taxpayers billions. This is why we urge you to vote pro.
We have a winner. All right, with a vote of 3-1, the students have won this debate.